Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Vitality Academy's presentation with Dr. Adriel Ramnarine. Tonight we're discussing immortality. Wonderful, wonderful topic. We're super happy you're here with us tonight. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is a presentation. It's a partnership between myself, John Ruman, and the doctors at the Ishtar Center in Chaguanas, Trinidad and Tobago. So let us know where you're from. We have lots of people tuning in from around the globe, so please tune in. If you're in Trinidad, let us know where you're in Trinidad. And real quick, I am going to be in the background for the majority, for the first 2/3 of this, and Dr. Adriel will have the front row, the main stage, and I will be helping you in the background with technical challenges because people have them. So I'll tell you real quick, if you do have technical challenges, refresh your browser. Make sure you're using either Google Chrome or Firefox. Those tend to have the least issues. There is an app that you can get on your phone called Big Marker. Just look up Big Marker. And that on your phone seems to have the least issues of anything. And everyone has a smartphone. So if you have enough space on your phone, I would encourage you to use that, and that'll mitigate most issues. But I'll be hiding in the background. So real quick, let me allow to introduce Adriel. So Adriel has been with the Ishtar Center for about 4 years. Before that, he worked in emergency and primary care in San Fernando General and Cuba Medical Center. He got his medical degree in St. George's in Grenada, and he actually taught as a tutor/instructor for a year at the university, and I believe when he graduated. He is married, has 2 children, beautiful children, and he also personally is passionate about Qigong. He does Tai Chi, and he does Latin dancing. So tonight we're not gonna learn any dance moves, but we are gonna learn how to live longer. So with that, I want to welcome Dr. Adriel Ramnarine. The stage is yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, John. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this chat. So we're going to try and talk about immortality today, which is a concept, that at Ishtar we're very passionate about. It's about bringing about longevity, wellness, happiness, health, and it's really something very close to us. It's something we try to incorporate into our daily lives. The things I'm going to share with you today. So let's begin. So I prepared a few slides as well to help guide us along this presentation, and start these up. Right. So we're beginning this talk on immortality with a quote from a famous, or some people may consider him an infamous rapper. And he said, "Shoot for the stars. So if you fall, you land on a cloud." And immortality is that the idea is that we shoot for the infinite. And if we end up falling short of that, and you live 150 years or even 200 years, then I consider that a success. That's a great achievement. So some wisdom there from Kanye West, and that'll start us off in this chat. The whole idea of this is to start discussing, okay, well, what is aging and what causes aging? And aging can be defined as sort of the process of growing old. Now, this is a definition from the Oxford Dictionary. The process of growing old, and people define that as different things: disease, degeneration, getting old, chronic diseases, not being able to do things that you were able to do as a young person, as a youthful person. And so aging is that, the process of growing old. We're going to attempt to look at discussing, some of the causes. Now, the thing about aging is that it's still very much a science that's evolving and shifting and growing. And when I was in medical school at the time, this would have been close to almost about 20 years, about 17 years ago. I remember having a discussion with my physiology professor, and he at the time was telling me, to this day we don't properly understand aging and understand, we have an idea of why we have a finite lifespan, but we don't understand what causes that degeneration and breakdown of the human body over time. And since then, we've actually come quite a long way, and the science has advanced quite a lot, and we now know a lot more than we did then. And it's amazing what 17 years can do in the field of science and discovery, and And even through personal discovery, through me seeing patients on a daily basis, working with them to achieve longevity, to achieve anti-aging, to get them on a path that's off of away from chronic disease. And so we're going to try to break that down a bit. And so far there's four big things that come up in terms of when we discuss aging and trying to understand the process of aging. Telomere degradation. I'll explain what telomeres are in a second. Senescent cells is another big topic. Mitochondrial disease and mitochondrial health. And again, these are some terms that a lot of you all may not be familiar with, but I'm going to go into them and explain them, in a way that's easy to understand. And the last was chronic runaway inflammation. So these are some of the causes when you look at the biology of it. And we're going to sort of get into this now. Now, telomeres. What are telomeres? So what we have here is a picture of a cell. And if you look into the nucleus of that cell, you have that little X-shaped thing there. That's actually called a chromosome. And a chromosome is essentially your genetic information, your DNA. It's wrapped up and bound to proteins. And it comes together to form essentially that X-shaped structure there, which is a chromosome. Now, on this diagram, you'll see these little orange little ends there. And those orange little pieces are what we call telomeres. To explain telomeres, I'll give you a nice little example. You'll remember shoelaces. And at the ends of shoelaces, you get these nice little plastic caps at the end of them. And the point of that little plastic cap is actually to protect your shoelace so that it doesn't fray out and it doesn't come apart. And because the end of the shoelace is actually the weak point. And it's the same in these chromosomes and in your DNA. So when you're wearing your shoe and you're using your shoe and you're going through your normal wear and tear, those little plastic caps at the end of your shoelaces, they slowly wear down and break down. And as they wear down and break down, they break down and they protect the shoelace itself while they themselves get broken down. And it's the same thing for telomeres. Telomeres, think of them as little caps at the end of your chromosomes. They're little DNA caps of little pieces of, you could call them nonsense DNA that aren't really used in the body except for protecting the ends of the chromosome or the piece of genetic material. So whenever a cell divides through normal use, what happens is that cell actually now snips off a little piece of that telomere. So every time a cell divides, you lose your telomeres. And you'll see in this little diagram here that when a cell is dividing, you're losing little bits and little bits and little bits of your telomeres until that cell can't divide anymore. Now, before 17 years ago, science at that point had thought that, that was the end of it. That is what demonstrates that you have a final, a final lifespan, meaning that your finite lifespan. So your finite lifespan was actually thought to be due to the ends of these telomeres, until we discovered that there's actually something called telomerase. Telomerase is an enzyme that is involved with your telomeres. And the whole point of telomerase is that telomerase actually helps to lengthen your telomeres. And by lengthening your telomeres, your cells now can continue to divide beyond the point where the telomeres start getting exhausted. And when we look at the cells in the body that tend to have these high telomerase activity, you tend to find stem cells and germ cells, which these are found in the bone marrow, and also in babies, developing babies, and as well in cancer cells. Cancer cells are what we call immortal cells. They will continue dividing and dividing and dividing, and they don't stop. That's because their telomerase is highly active, and it keeps repairing the telomeres every time the cell divides. So the telomere length stays very stable. Stem cells as well do the same thing, and stem cells have the ability to get into your areas of tissue, and they tend to repair, regenerate, and help to heal tissues. So when they discovered telomerase, they started realizing, wait, there's a way for your cells to start, repairing the telomeres so that your cells can continue dividing. But it was thought that, that if you go, trying to find drugs that can activate this stuff, you can actually induce cancerous changes within these cells and start causing these cells to start dividing, without having a control. So the telomere is there to actually protect the DNA is dividing, and as well create and the ability of the cell to be able to stop after a while if it needs to. Now, in essence, now to assist in longevity, what we need to do is find a way to activate these telomerase enzymes in a healthy way. Because again, if you activate it in an unhealthy way, you're looking at cancer cells. If you activate it in a healthy way, you're looking at enhancing your cell's ability to divide and to continue to propagate so that you can continue to repair damaged and dead tissue. So that's what telomeres do. Telomeres are essentially just there to protect the DNA, and it's about the activation of that enzyme to give you an expanded ability to continue to regenerate those cells. So we'll now, in terms of telomeres, senescent cells, chronic inflammation, and mitochondrial health, the fascinating thing is that most of the things we're going to talk about in terms of enhancing your longevity and extending your lifespan and living healthier and longer, what you're going to find is that most of the things that work on telomeres actually have an effect on senescent cells, mitochondrial health, chronic inflammation. So at the end of this, when I describe what these things actually are, so you can get a better understanding of what the aging process really is about, we'll discuss how we can activate these telomeres and further on how we can solve the other problems we come across. So next, we're going to start talking about senescent cells. So what is a senescent cell? A senescent cell can be described simply and in layman's terms for everybody to understand as sort of like a zombie cell. And when I say a zombie cell, it's just sort of like a cell that's not efficient anymore in carrying out its processes. So if that cell is, for example, a muscle cell, it's just going to be sitting there and it's not going to be pulling its weight in that muscle tissue. If it is a nerve or a neuronal cell, that cell is going to be sitting there and it's not going to be transmitting nerve impulses very efficiently. It's not going to be generating enough energy for it to function normally, and it's actually going to be disruptive to the cells around it. Think of it like an assembly line. If you have a factory and you have 10 people on that assembly line, let's say 3 people decide to take the piss, and they are just putting up their feet and they're not doing their job, that's going to lead to a backup. So just a few cells actually being senescent within a tissue can actually have a profound effect on how that tissue functions. And that's why senescent cells can actually cause a problem. And as these cells build up, now these cells get this way from being damaged. They take on DNA damage, they take on mitochondrial damage, they take on damage to their cellular membranes and cellular structures. And when they take on damage like this, they can actually become senescent cells. There are other options for a damaged cell within the body, and this diagram shows that very nicely. A cell, when it takes on damage, it can actually decide on its own, once a lot of its self-protective mechanisms are working, it can actually decide to apoptose. And apoptosis is the mechanism by which that cell will then realize, hey, I'm damaged, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm just taking up space here. And there's a potential for me to become cancerous or senescent, and I need to kill myself. So the cell will actually activate with the assistance of its mitochondria, and I'll explain what mitochondria are in a second, to kill itself. And it slowly does that. It destroys itself, and then the immune system comes and cleans up whatever it leaves behind. So the last option is for a cell to become cancerous. And cancer, as we all know, is a disease where you have cells that are damaged, and they start actually dividing and dividing and dividing, and they start pulling nutrients from the body. They start disrupting and destroying tissues in their area, and they essentially, eventually, if left unchecked, they can cause death. So essentially, when you look at senescence, we think senescent cells are actually a bad thing, but the idea is that senescence can be good and bad. It depends on, again, how your body modulates this function and how it manages the ability of a cell to become senescent. So they're actually starting to realize now that senescent cells are a defense mechanism against cancer. And what's interesting is that a cell, based on some of its genes that actually protect it from cancer, so P53 is a gene that's found in your cells, that produces a protein which has these really amazing effects. It's a tumor suppressor gene. So it actually prevents your cells from becoming cancerous. A lot of times when a cell has gone cancerous, you find that these p53 genes are either damaged and they're producing sometimes mutated forms of that gene, or sometimes even they're not producing the proteins associated with that gene at all. So your tumor suppressing effects are down. So once this p53 gene is actually intact within your genetic information within your cell now, what it will do, it will actually convert itself into a senescent cell rather than turning cancerous. Senescent cells are relatively inactive. They can disrupt cellular function around them, but for the most part, they're not as active as the other cells around them. And this is a defense mechanism again. So you're shutting that cell down so that it doesn't go rogue. And that's a very important fact. So if you balance senescent cell formation within your body, it can actually be a good thing. What then happens after a cell turns into a senescent cell? It should either start repairing itself where it can activate apoptosis, or the immune system can come along if it's in a healthy state. And that's very important. The immune system has to be healthy to carry out these functions. So if the immune system is in a very healthy state, certain cells that are part of the immune system, natural killer cells, T killer cells, they will come along and they will locate these senescent cells, and they will actually destroy these cells, remove them from the tissue. And by doing so, you're now freeing up space in that tissue for cells to actually start dividing and replacing, or stem cells to actually move into that area to start healing, repairing, and regenerating that tissue. So it's actually buildup of senescent cells has a very important role in the aging process. And that's why you can notice, you'll see, you can take a person in their 60s and somebody in their 20s. And let's say that person in their 20s, if you examine their muscle tissue, it may be the same size as the muscle tissue of the 60-year-old. Again, there are exceptions to this rule on how healthy you keep yourself, but the average 60-year-old out there and the average 20-year-old out there, if you observe their muscle tissue, let's say if you look at a muscle tissue that's the same size, in a healthy person, you may find very small amount of senescent cells within that muscle tissue. So when that person lifts an object, most of those cells, 95% of those cells are pulling and they're moving, and they're actually, moving that body part, that arm or that leg or that part of their body. Whereas in the older person, what tends to happen is you find a little bit more of those cells now have been converted into senescent cells, and there's a buildup of these senescent cells in the tissues. So what then happens is that you have this situation where now maybe 70% of your cells might be sort of pulling, and the other 30% might just be sitting down there, relaxing, feet up, chilling out, and they're not contributing much to the system. So that's one of the mechanisms by which senescent cells actually have an effect on the aging process. And as I was saying, there's this delicate balance that has to be maintained between formation and removal of these senescent cells. And if not, senescent cells are going to build up. And if senescence is too, you don't have enough senescence, then you're running the risk of developing cancer, which again is going to show up in your lifespan. So again, a little bit further down, we're going to discuss how we can assist our body in removing these senescent cells and therefore slowing down and possibly even reversing the aging process. And again, this is very much linked to telomeres. Telomeric health and senescent health formation is very much connected. And so we're just breaking these up into pieces so that we can understand them a little bit better. The next thing we want to discuss is mitochondrial health. And mitochondria are quite interesting little creatures. Now, when I was doing high school biology back about 20 years ago, mitochondria were presented to us as organelles. Now, what is an organelle? Within a cell, just like within the human body, you have organs that helps the body to carry out its functions. Within a cell, you have organelles, which are little structures that assist that cell in carrying out its function. Be it repair, be it digesting proteins and compounds and fats and lipids, be it maintenance of the cell structure itself. Now, mitochondria were taught to us as being these organelles within the cell that produces all the energy. So they were called the powerhouses of the cells. Some of you may remember that from high school biology. and as powerhouse of the cell, These things is what allowed our cells to generate vast amounts of energy and to allow our cells to carry out the functions that they needed. Without mitochondria, your cells could only generate very small amounts of energy. With mitochondria, it's the efficiency you get is way higher. It's a magnitude of more than 10 to 15 times higher, the energy production that you can get out of these mitochondria per unit of, let's say, for example, your cell is burning glucose. Now, further on down the line, when I started studying microbiology in medical school, I started realizing that these mitochondria, and the professor led us down this path, that these mitochondria actually look very much like bacterial cells. And he didn't say it outright, but he suggested it very quietly, because again, the science was undecided about this at that time. And there's still some opposition to it, but we're leaning more and more now to realizing that mitochondria are bacterial cells. They're not actually just simple organelles that exist within your cells. And that opens us up to a huge level of science. So these are separate organisms that exist within your cells, and they have a symbiotic relationship with you. And you are providing them with food and a safe space to survive. And they are providing you with vast amounts of energy and access to that energy for your cells to be able to come together and form tissues and carry out higher functions, and to form human beings that have emotions and consciousness, and we can experience life. So these things are actually quite amazing. So view this as a separate entity within your cell. And when we talk about microbiome, the microbiome are all these bacterial and viral and fungal and protozoan organisms that exist within the body. Mitochondria, I consider them as part of the microbiome. And they generate all the energy that the cell needs. Now, we're learning more and more about these mitochondria, and we're starting to realize that they carry out processes more than just letting the producing energy for the cell that it survives within. Mitochondria even have an effect on anti-aging. They have an effect on your cancer fighting ability as well. Recent discoveries are leading us to realize that mitochondria actually act as like a little brother within the cell, or a conscience. And if that cell is behaving abnormally or starting to have sort of changes to its genetic information that could lead to cancer, the mitochondria will even start initiating programmed cell death, which means producing these reactive oxidative species within that cell to actually cause that cell to kill itself, to turn on those mechanisms of apoptosis. So mitochondria are very important in signaling apoptosis within a cell. So these mitochondria actually act in preservation of the whole and their own self-interest as well, because a diseased body that has cancer and is battling itself will not be able to sustain the mitochondria, and the mitochondria will not be able to sustain it. So we're in this together. And that's why these mitochondria are providing a huge benefit to us. And that's why we need to treat them well, and we need to protect them. And we need to be consciously, I would even say be consciously thankful of them and what they provide for us on a regular basis. So looking at mitochondria and how they affect the disease process, unhealthy mitochondria actually have a role in the senescent cell formation. So remember, we were talking about apoptosis. So if a cell turns senescent instead of turning cancerous, the two options are for the immune system to now come in and remove that cell, like we said, or the mitochondria in that cell to start initiating apoptosis and allow that cell to kill itself or to commit suicide for the greater good of the whole. But if your mitochondria are unhealthy, they're not going to be able to fulfill that role. And therefore, we're starting to there's a new research in science now, and there are new fields in medicine of mitochondrial medicine, where we're actually looking at the health of the person's mitochondria. And again, we're now entering these aspects, but there are things that you can do to help improve your mitochondrial health, and we'll discuss that a little bit further down. Other things that can affect the mitochondria as we age is mutations within the mitochondria. And a healthy mitochondria, because these are bacterial cells, can positively deal with mutations. They can repair themselves. They have mechanisms to deal with these things, because the simpler a cell is, and bacterial cells are simpler than our eukaryotic or complex cells, they deal with mutations a lot better than our cells do. The more complex you are, the more things can go wrong. The simpler you are, less things that are there that can go wrong. So a sick mitochondria, an unhealthy mitochondria, plays a role in as we age and mutations start building up or start affecting these mitochondria. The mitochondrial efficiency drops, the health of these mitochondria drops. They're not able to produce as much energy. They're not able to help in cell signaling within your own cells. One thing we try to advise our patients against is exposure to glyphosate formulated weedicides. And these would be things like Roundup and Swiper. Now, they've done a lot of studies on glyphosate and Roundup, and they've found that it does cause damage to your mitochondria, to your bacterial microbiome, to your gut health, to your liver. And then when you include now, weedicides are not just pure glyphosates. They involve a lot more stabilizing chemicals and a lot of other compounds that work with the glyphosate to make it even more toxic as a weedicide. And it's these compounded chemicals that work together. They have a lot of risk to your mitochondrial health. They actually make your mitochondria ill. They mess with the mitochondrial cell membranes. They affect ion transport across the cell membrane of that mitochondria. They affect the mitochondrial enzymes and its ability to produce energy, which now causes your mitochondrial efficiency to drop. And it essentially causes these mitochondria to become sick. And the problem is we're exposed to so much Roundup now in our diets. Virtually all grains, non-organic grains that we consume today, be it oats, be it wheat, be it corn, they're saturated with Roundup. And that can pose a serious problem to our overall health. The chronic inflammation can actually lead to damage of the mitochondria and where these, and we'll chat a little bit next about what causes chronic inflammation. And the question now is, how do we increase our mitochondrial health and induce mitochondrial biogenesis, which is essentially causing these mitochondria to heal themselves, multiply, and get to a healthy, steady state where they're functioning efficiently and producing the energy that our cells will need. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation, is very, very important. And it's essentially it's what is the causative factor of a lot of the chronic diseases that people suffer from today. Inflammation in general is not so much a problem, but chronic inflammation is. Inflammation is a healthy process essentially gone wrong, gone berserk. It's Frankenstein, and essentially, inflammation, what it does and its role in the body is part of the healing process. So, for example, if you get a cut or you have some insult or injury to a tissue, what tends to happen is you get this surge in inflammation. And inflammation brings, the immune system. It brings blood supply to the tissues. It brings all these regenerative and growth factors to the area. And it helps to mop up and clean up damaged residual, stuff from damaged tissues and cells, invading bacterial organisms. But for healing to progress, inflammation needs to drop off. And then the healing process needs to continue, and regeneration or repair needs to happen. So think of inflammation as the army and the cleanup crew. They're going to come in there and they're going to clean up and they're going to get rid of anything that's not supposed to be there. Now, chronic inflammation is where the inflammation just doesn't stop. It continues going on and on and on and on for days, weeks, months, years, decades. And that just slowly causes disease and degeneration and breakdown of, it slows down your telomerase activity. It causes, more cells to start turning senescent, because the more you're damaging your tissues and insulting your tissues, you're leading to these cells actually, multiplying and dividing and then eventually leading to senescence. So it's essentially a wear and tear mechanism that just keeps, it's an assault on your cell at a cellular level on all your cells and your tissues and your biology. It damages the function and the body's ability to, again, repair itself. So if inflammation is happening in its balanced way, it's fine. But if it's chronic and it's runaway, it's just going to slowly cause, breakdown. And all chronic diseases, cancer in all stages, are linked to inflammation. Neurological disorders are linked to chronic inflammation. Parkinson's disease, Huntington's, chorea, dementia, Alzheimer's. Diabetes is caused by chronic inflammation. in the long term over, decades, years and years and years of insult to the body, to the pancreas, to the liver, to the individual tissues and their ability to work with glucose in your body. Mental health is even linked to chronic inflammation, because chronic inflammation, the gut has actually been found to have an effect on your thought process. What sort of, are you having low moods, depressed thoughts? Chronic inflammation in your gut actually has a role in that as well. You can find by improving that, you can actually improve your moods. Is it chronic anxieties? Is it, anger, frustration? All these things have effects on chronic inflammation. So more or less all chronic disease, again, cardiovascular, high blood pressure, and its effects, renal function issues, metabolic diseases, all these things are linked to chronic diseases. And chronic diseases places a lot of stress on telomeres, on your body's ability to manage senescent cells within your system, and as well, your mitochondrial health. So chronic inflammation is one that ties into everything. And so we have to learn how to deal with chronic inflammation. So we're moving on, and just some simple ways of dealing with these problems of telomeres, of senescent cell buildup, of this is just a few pictures that I put together on living a wellness, happiness, joy, and putting into practice everyday things that are going to assist you in longevity. I implore you to not wait last minute and decide, when you're 50s and you're in your 60s, because we've seen that trend in Ishtara. Young people, not a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s are very much concerned with longevity. It's a lot of our patients who tend to be in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. They're the ones that need to be, that are very much interested in longevity. But, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be at that point, but if you start focusing on this at an early age, you're going to have a huge advantage later on in your life. Especially since the way that our diet and lifestyles now are the things that we're exposed to, the way that we eat, the way we live, the stress that we're under, the exposures to all of these electromagnetic frequencies, all of these things are putting a lot of pressure on the human body to survive, to continue coping, to continue managing. And you're starting to see chronic diseases, and you're starting to see breakdown and aging happening at a much earlier phase now than it would have been previously. I've spoken to radiologists who've told me that what's fascinating is in the aging process, you get a lot of calcification, and it's something you see in patients that are older. In young people, you don't get calcium building up in tissues, in your arteries, in your prostate, in your liver, in your brain. So as you age, you start seeing these calcifications build up in your tissues. And what a sonographer was telling me is that, in young people that she scans, she's starting to see that trend of calcifications happening in people in their 20s and 30s, which means that processes that are happening in patients, typically in their 50s and their 60s, before a few decades ago, are now happening to patients at a much younger state. And because people look at their parents to consider their life expectancy and how long they're going to live and how well they're going to do, they actually say, well, my parents lived into their 70s and they, developed their chronic diseases in their 60s. So I'm not too worried. I still have time. But actually, no, their diet and lifestyles are much different. So I implore you to start actually looking at these things now. And so that's why we're going to, discuss further how we can deal with these issues. So, eating for longevity. Now, Dr. Nilash would have covered some of this in a previous seminar, but I'll just gloss over some of these things in regards to what we give our patients on a regular basis to enhance longevity. And from a discussion I was having earlier with John, what I tend to recommend now, the thing is that we should eat how our ancestors have eaten, because that's what our bodies have adapted to eating. So somebody who's of East Indian descent, you tend to find a diet rich in whole foods, a diet rich in legumes, peas and beans, lots of vegetables, fruits. That's what we've sort of adapted to survive with. For Europeans, small amounts of dairy products, meat, lots of whole grains in their diet, that tends to make up, and some root and vegetables, and also above ground vegetables as well. When you look at Eskimos, for example, they get by on almost little to no plant-based matter at all. They mainly eat quite a lot of fish, seal meat, seal blubber. So it depends really, but the majority of humankind who live, around the temperate zones of the equator, we tend to eat mostly a plant-based diet, and our ancestors have eaten that as well. So it makes a lot of sense to stick with that, a plant-based diet that's rich in whole foods. The problem with that is that we, in the past couple of decades, we've overdone grains. Grains have been sort of, overdone. And we, because of the toxicity with these grains, the amount of glyphosate in these grains and all these things, corn, oats, wheat, we just eat too much of these things. And that's where the problem ends up. But eating grains is not necessarily a bad thing. You want to source sort of whole organic grains and balance it in your diet with lots of vegetables and nuts and seeds and lots of root tubers and vegetables and all these things. So you want to stick with more of a plant-based diet, unless you belong to these extreme northern climates that have adapted to surviving with a lot of plant-based diets. There's a lot of talking in North America and in Europe, and those countries have a very developed and very well-off, very rich meat industry, and there is an agenda there to push consumption of these meat products. We can have meat products in our diet or animal products in our diet, but I advise that they should be sort of wild caught or free range. The animals should be eating what they're supposed to be eating. They shouldn't just be eating all this grain that's laden with all these toxins. Or I think in the 90s and the early 2000s, we had issues where they were feeding chickens, ground up chickens. So animals should be eating what they're supposed to be eating. And if you look at in Trinidad here, for an example, my grandparents and parents growing up, they would have eaten meat and animal products sort of once a week, almost on like a Sunday, because it was a treat for the whole family to indulge in some chicken or some some goat meat or some lamb, it was sort of like a once a week occurrence. There's also a concept there. There's a group called the Blue Zones, where they've sort of looked at where in the world people live to be centenarians and they're still active and they're still healthy, and they have found as well that eating meat and animal products maybe 4 to 6 times for the week, that has that's healthy, that's fine, that's okay. But if we're eating animal product constantly, that tends to put a high inflammatory load on the body. It doesn't help quite a bit because our bodies aren't really adapted to that, and it increases inflammatory changes within the body because you have all these proteins. I was having a discussion earlier with John about the carnivore diet and these things, and essentially a lot of those concepts. When you look at how the human body is structured, we have multiple jointed fingers. And these fingers with opposing thumbs are designed for grasping and picking things, which is very much, foraging for plant-based foods. Carnivores tend to have claws and sharp claws without opposable thumbs for grasping and holding on to animals. We tend to have very underdeveloped canines. We have them there, but they're very small and they're very underdeveloped. Our jaws and our jaw muscles are actually very underdeveloped as well for dealing with prey and meat. We actually have more jaws that are designed for grinding and for crushing plant-based items and dealing with cellulose and roughage and fiber. Our stomachs are actually designed, our pH is around has an acid pH of about 2 and an acidic pH of around 2. Carnivores, they tend to have a more acidic stomach, below 2. And lastly, the length of your digestive tract. Our digestive tract is fairly long compared to carnivores, which deals a lot more with fermentation of fiber and soluble fibers and breaking down, helping to assist in breaking down of these fatty acids and these things that are found a lot in plant matter. So, excuse me, sorry, let me just get a glass of drink of water. Sorry about that. Right. So exceptions can be made about meat. You can have small amounts of these things. In Ishtara, we've tested and we found sardines and common fowl free range eggs can be had on a regular basis, and that can be used to bump up the protein in your diet. And it doesn't seem to have the effect that meat does. So you can have those things fairly regularly, 3 times to almost, every day you can have these eggs or sardines. You want to avoid heavily processed foods. Processed foods they have a really negative impact. When you go to the supermarket and you pick up a box of something and you start seeing lines and lines of what looks like code for things that you can't even pronounce or understand what they mean. These are a lot of the things that we put into food, not so that they're there for your health, but actually so they're there for a long shelf life, so that this thing can be packaged and transported, around the globe and end up in a supermarket or warehouse where it spends weeks to months before you pick it up. And then it can, last even longer in your cupboard or your fridge. So the design of these processed food items is not for your health and well-being. It's actually, to make money, to run our capitalist economy so that food can be something more global. So avoiding these things and trying to eat more local healthy food. A lot of these blue zones comparisons between these groups of people that live into centenarians, they actually have found that they eat a lot of local food that is unadulterated, whole foods that is local, that their ancestors have been eating for generations. The next thing I want to talk about is avoiding trans and esterified fats. These are things like margarines and artificial butters. These things have been around for the greater part of the last century. And it's only in the last 2 decades or so we've realized how dangerous trans fats are. The industry has then migrated now to something called esterified fats, which is another fat that doesn't really occur in our natural diet. And if something isn't occurring in our natural diet and our bodies aren't accustomed to seeing these things, it's going to cause a lot of inflammation. It's going to shorten your telomeres. It's going to cause more senescent cell formation. It's going to damage your mitochondria. So stay away from these things. Maybe in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to have enough data on esterified fats to know that what damage they're causing to the body. And when we've tested it here in Ishtara, it doesn't react well to the human body. Let's talk about sugar and refined carbohydrates. Refined carbohydrates, they're good carbohydrates and bad carbohydrates. Good ones tend to be the unrefined ones, unrefined root tubers that have a lot of soluble fiber, that have a lot of minerals, vitamins, nutrients in them. When I refer to as sort of refined carbohydrates, it's a lot of flour. People in their diets today consume a huge amount of flour. We don't even think about it. And this flour is refined. It is laden with Roundup and glyphosate. It is bleached, so it has a longer shelf life, and it looks, more appealing to the eye. And that, you're adding in all these extra chemicals. You put in all these dough conditioners and all these compounds that give the bread the fluffy, spongy texture. And all these things just run amok in your system and take inflammation out of control. Sugar as well is you should have sugar very, very sparingly. Do not use sugar every single day. Sugar is going to increase your risk of cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks when consumed on a regular basis. And it's not associated with longevity in every single study that they've looked at. So avoid refined sugar on a regular basis. Now, if you're consuming very tiny amounts of sugar once in a blue moon, every 2-3 months, that's not going to cause a huge problem. But try to avoid it in general on a daily, regular basis. We're just going to discuss a little bit of the mechanism of how refined sugars and refined carbohydrates actually affect the aging process. And it actually is linked to insulin spikes. Insulin spikes are actually, insulin is your hormone in your body that your body releases when sugars start entering your body and start entering your bloodstream. Insulin tells your cells to take that sugar and bring it into the cells. So it's out of the blood now and into the cells. Sugar is an amazing source of energy, but is also a curse. It's a double-edged sword because sugars actually can bind proteins in your body, on your cells, and actually damage and deactivate those proteins. And these glycosylated proteins in your body can have a lot of negative effects. They contribute to the aging process. And this is why diabetics who are uncontrolled, if you look at diabetics, the problems that diabetics who are uncontrolled have is their body ages rapidly. Their eyes start deteriorating. They start having problems with their skin, with the blood vessels in their heart, in their legs, in their extremities. They start developing problems in kidneys. They start developing problems, in general throughout the body. So it's just an accelerated aging process, and that's what high sugar in the blood does. It accelerates the aging process. And insulin as well is a hormone that has an effect. Now, insulin itself is not dangerous, but when you're spiking insulin too much and high sugars too much, that is going to accelerate your aging process. Now, to delve into that a little bit further, we have to understand fed and fasted states. Now, our bodies are designed with scarcity in mind, because it's only in the last 100 years or so human beings have had this sort of access to abundance. We could go into the supermarket tomorrow and pick up whatever we want to eat, whatever we could think of, we could find it. And the problem with that is that our bodies aren't actually adapted to live like that. We're actually adapted to having periods of abundance and then having periods of scarcity. And our body has adapted to carrying out various processes during that time of scarcity and then abundance. Think about it. I like to give my patients the analogy of, let's say a warehouse. When a warehouse has a delivery truck coming in and goods coming in that day, the warehouse staff is very much involved in unpacking those trucks and packing up the shelves. So it's the same thing in your body. When your body has food coming in, your body is very much in a mode, and insulin facilitates this, of breaking down that food and then absorbing it and packaging it in various parts of the body. And the body is in that mode, and that's called a fed state. A fasted state now, what that does to the body is now your body is now in a state of scarcity. And just like in a warehouse, when there's no deliveries coming in, the warehouse foreman can now direct his employees to say, well, two of you need to go repair that shelf that's breaking down the back. I need two of you to go clean up that spill, these mess that the delivery guys from the truck driver made. And I need some guys, to help me with this audit to figure out how we can become more efficient. And your body does the same exact thing. Your body is going to undergo a process of autophagy, and actually your stem cells start rising at that point. You start pulling out a lot of the nutrients that you've had in storage, and you're going to now start repairing and regenerating. Autophagy is the process by which your cells will break down dead, old, damaged parts of themselves, and they will actually start repairing and healing themselves and turning themselves almost into a new cell, like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. So that cell is now going to heal and repair and regenerate itself. And that prevents that movement to either apoptosis, senescence, or cancerous changes. So by having these fasted states, you can actually, and that's what we've always preached at Ishtara, intermittent fasting is something quite amazing. Dr. Ramnarine, the head of our practice, he's actually been practicing intermittent fasting for quite a long time. And just intuitively and actually having too much work to do. He would start off work earlier because patients would come in the morning and he wouldn't get a chance to eat breakfast. And then as soon as he's seen those patients, run home, shower, get ready, get into work mode. And then at 7 o'clock in the night, come home and have a big meal because he's hungry. And so he would have just one meal for the day. And that would have put his body into that amazing state of autophagy. And so without even, considering just sort of intuition, that's the way he was operating. And that's what he has taught to us over the years as well. And we've started adapting that as well. In my personal practice, I don't eat breakfast on my weekdays and I don't eat lunch. I tend to eat my first meal around 3 to 5 p.m. And then I'll have something again at around 7 to 8 p.m. when I get home. So I try to practice that as well, giving the body those periods of fed and fasted states. And some days I will even, take some time off and just not have anything at all for an entire day. So that actually helps in slowing down the aging process, affecting senescence, telomere, health, and even reducing chronic inflammation in the body. We're going to go on to a few supplements that in the practice here we recommend and we like and we use ourselves as well for longevity. And the first one I'm going to touch on is actually quite simple, and it's liquid sunlight, and that is vitamin D3. Now, vitamin D comes in two major forms. And the first form is vitamin D2, which we get a lot in our food. And some supplements, vitamin D will come in vitamin D2. But that's a very poorly absorbable form. It has to be activated within the body. It's not a good form to consume vitamin D2. And if you consume too much vitamin D2, it can actually build up and have a toxic effect on the body. Vitamin D3 is the active form. It's less toxic. It's easily absorbable. And it actually has a greater effect as well because it's already activated. vitamin D3, a lot of studies, they found that patients with optimal levels of vitamin D3, you're going to find that their telomerase activity is actually enhanced. And they've tracked patients, groups of patients who have suboptimal levels of vitamin D and patients who have optimal levels. And they found that the patients who have optimal levels, when they've checked them back 6 months later, their telomeres length, their telomeres have actually been either the same or better. And in the group that had suboptimal vitamin D levels, their telomeres were actually reduced from previous checks 6 months before. And when they've looked at studies, for vitamin D3, your risk of dying from all causes reduces when your vitamin D levels are optimal. How do you get optimal vitamin D levels? You can supplement, because a lot of us, we work indoors, we work in air-conditioned buildings, we rarely see the sun. And especially people who are darker skinned, we need more access. We need more access to more sunlight than people who are lighter skinned. Lighter skinned people can actually spend less time in the sun and get more vitamin D. Darker skinned people need to spend more time in the sun. But we're better adapted to the harsh, effects of the sun. So I tend to recommend up to about 5,000 IUs daily. That's what I take personally. And I recommend that people, either get out into the sun, and you want skin exposure. So the more skin exposure you have, the more vitamin D you're going to produce. If you go outdoors in the sun and you're covered up from head to toe, you're not going to generate any vitamin D. So step into the light, get some more sunlight. You can get some vitamin D supplement, and D3, that is, and look for 5,000 IUs for adults, and you can use that. One quick addition, vitamin D has also shown to enhance your ability to fight coronaviruses, influenza viruses, parainfluenza viruses, rhinoviruses, common cold and influenza viruses. These viruses do not badly affect individuals who have optimal levels of vitamin D3. So it's also protective. The next thing we want to talk about is a supplement called quercetin. And quercetin is sort of yellow, pigmented compound that we find a lot in plants and especially vegetables, things like spring onions. Neem is a herb that's very high in quercetin. Certain things like sweet potatoes, they have small amounts of it. This has antioxidant effects and anti-inflammatory effects on the body, so that's going to sort of slow down the aging process. It also has effects on healthy glucose metabolism, and you'll find a lot of these substances that have effects on longevity also affect your glucose metabolism. As I was speaking earlier about how your glucose metabolism affects your ability to live a long, healthy life. Quercetin also has some effects on the mitochondrial health, and it improves mitochondrial function, and it also helps improve mitochondria to divide and to spread and proliferate in a healthy way, of course. And lastly, it has neuroprotective effects, which means it's protecting the brain, it's protecting your mental health, your neuronal health. So quercetin can be used as a supplement, and I tend to recommend about 1,000 milligrams per day. If you're looking at specifically patients where we find that their mitochondria is not in a healthy state, I combine quercetin with a few other herbs, ubiquinol, which is one of them, and I tend to recommend 200 milligrams of ubiquinol daily. Berberine, which is also a mitochondrial stimulant, and about 1,000 milligrams of berberine daily. And as well, to use a compound called PQQ. And PQQ also works on the nerves and the brain, and it has effects on the mitochondria. And going on those 4 supplements for about 3 months or so has profound effects on these patients. They come back looking energized. Their mitochondria is functioning at an optimal level. They're producing a lot more energy. They feel energetic. They feel really good. And because it's helping your mitochondria, I mean, that supplement regime actually has anti-cancer effects as well. And I've also seen some positive effects in patients who've already, have been diagnosed with cancer. So I tend to recommend that a lot. Now, this one we all know, everybody knows, so I don't need to speak for a long time on this. Turmeric or curcumin or curcuminoids are the compounds that are active in turmeric. These things reduce a lot of inflammation in the gut, and their primary activity is within the gut. The activities are as well all around the body in reducing inflammation. But if you could reduce inflammation in the gut, you can reduce inflammation throughout the entire body. And therefore, so using turmeric on a regular basis actually has some really positive effects on inflammation. It has a lot of antioxidants, there are a lot of minerals as well, which aid in your health and well-being. And it also slows down aging and reduces your risk of neurodegenerative diseases by activating BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which actually helps in enhancing the health of brain cells. There's a lot of talk, and I've heard this from doctors, pharmacists, news media outlets, experts, that turmeric is a dangerous compound if consumed every day. It's not. Indians throughout in India and in Southeast Asia have been consuming turmeric for ages, and there has been no, on a daily basis, and there's no negative effects out of that. You can overdo it, yes, but we found that when you start to cross, 2 tablespoons a day, that you actually, for a prolonged period of time, you can actually get into a situation where you're consuming too much, and you can have some negative effects on the bowel and the bowel health. But even a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons daily, you can even get turmeric supplements, which are easier to take. And I tend to use turmeric tablets and sometimes really turmeric powder on a regular basis to slow down the aging process. This one is the last one I'm going to talk, because we can't speak too much here. There are loads of things that cause, but these are ones that are near and dear to me. This one I love, which is called gynostemma. I discovered this when I was on a conference learning acupuncture in the States on auricular therapy. And there was a Chinese practitioner who attended, and at the tea station, they have the usual coffee and tea, and this Chinese practitioner had laid down a little box with some of this tea called gynostemma. Gynostemma is actually a small root of a rooting vining plant that actually has quite a bit of these amazing effects. It's been known for ages in traditional Chinese medicine. It's just only recently being put out there to the West, and for Western medicine is starting to learn about it. And I found when I'm curious, so I picked up the gynostemma tea and tried it, and I found that after having been jet lagged from flying for about 15 hours to get to this conference, my brain just awakened. I was able to assimilate the information easier. I was awake and alert, and that's why we attribute gynostemma is known to have what we call adaptogenic effects. Herbs that are adaptogens, what they do is they help your hormonal system, your immune system, and your neuronal system adapt to stress. Because those are the systems that are hit hardest by mental, emotional, and physical stress. And that's chronic stress. So adaptogens are herbs that assist in our bodies dealing with that. So using gynostemma on a regular basis, you can buy this in teas, you can buy it in capsule form, actually has some interesting effects. Now, some people who actually don't tolerate lower levels of glucose very well may see caution when using gynostemma. You may want to use it more in the evening time because it actually can drop your blood sugars. I found that after having it in the morning at that conference, by midday, I was actually grumpy and tired, if you could use the term hangry. And once I ate, I felt better. But it does have an effect on lowering blood sugar and lowering glucose metabolism. So it's actually great for diabetics to use this. It's great for people who are not getting enough sleep, who are under a lot of chronic stress. It has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects on the body. AMPK is an enzyme in the body that governs energy production, and it has huge roles in mitochondrial health as well. And gynostemma has very positive effects on this enzyme AMPK and generating energy within the body. So, I would recommend, get some gynostemma, try it, use it, and use it on a regular basis because it does have a lot of positive effects on longevity. Quickly, we wanted to talk about neuroplasticity. We can find ourselves living longer, but you're finding a lot of patients who are living longer in their 70s and their 80s. They're developing what we call neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. And these neurodegenerative diseases, essentially, the patient is doing fine up to that point, but the brain starts aging very rapidly. And that creates a problem because now the mind starts degenerating and the body may be functioning at an okay level. Neuroplasticity is defined as the brain's ability to reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning, having new experiences, and after following brain injury. So neuroplasticity is very high in children. Children's ability to learn, to adapt to new situations, to figure out things, to solve problems, so the more experiences you have and the more you learn, and you're developing your neuroplasticity. The less you do those things, your neuroplasticity starts declining. And enhancing neuroplasticity has effects on the physical health of the brain as well. So as we age, this is decreasing, and you'll see this in older people. High neuroplasticity allows you to adapt to new situations, be comfortable in new situations, assimilate new information. But as we get older, we get very comfortable where we're at. We don't like new concepts and new ideas. We get frustrated with the change in the world around us. We started looking at young people and thinking, these kids are going on a disastrous path and the world is in a mess, because we are not in touch with the flow of reality around us. We're stuck in a very old way of thinking, and we're not adapting to new ways of thinking and new ways of problem solving and new ways of figuring things out. So we have to focus on neuroplasticity when we consider longevity. So that's what you'll tend to see. But by working on neuroplasticity, we want to enhance it. And the simple advice here I can give is use it or lose it. The more you use your brain and your cerebral activity, and you enhance cerebral activity, you're going to enhance neuroplasticity. And that is going to slow down the aging process of the brain. There's a concept of mastery in ancient Japanese culture. And they look at perfecting something to the point where it's almost they're in a meditative state while they're doing something, and they keep learning over the years, and they never stop learning, and they're always finding new ways to work on something. And in that sense, you want to try to develop that. You want to have something in your life that you're always working on mastering. And in mastering something, you now can share that with people, and you can teach, you can share, you can show that to others. And in teaching, we learn ourselves, and we actually enhance our own mastery as well of the subject that we're doing. So always have something in your life that you're working on mastering. Movement, exercise, this is actually very important for neuroplasticity, and we'll discuss that in a second. Learning new skills, especially things that you find difficult, actually has profound effects on neuroplasticity. So if you have no propensity for musical instruments, for understanding music, for figuring it out, and you're concerned about the health of your brain, go pick up a musical instrument and start learning it. You're going to start creating neuronal and synaptic connections that weren't there before. And you're going to enhance your brain's activity. And you're going to start being able to enhance your neuroplasticity. You're going to be able to look at problems under new light. The brain is going to be able to adapt better to injury and insult. If you're terrible at cooking, jump in the kitchen and starting to figure this out and starting to learn and master it. If you're terrible at public speaking, get out there and start conquering that and learn to be great at it. And we have to keep reinventing and changing ourselves regularly. When you find yourself struggling against the flow of life, because life is always changing and shifting, and what ends up happening as we age, we find ourselves stuck in our way of thinking, and we suffer as a result of that. That we end up in a state where we say, well, I don't understand this world anymore, and I can't figure this out, and we get stressed and frustrated. If we keep reinventing the way that we look at life and the problems that we come across, and keep changing our perspective, if we introspect and say, okay, I'm approaching this problem with a hammer. What if I approach it with a screwdriver instead? And we start looking at different ways to approach the challenges that we come across in life. That is going to enhance neuroplasticity, and we should be doing that on a constant basis and reminding ourselves to do that. Now, quick about movement and exercise. The key is balance here and balancing the different forms of exercise. I'll hear people, going to the gym and overdoing it on strength training, and they're not working on their flexibility, their coordination, their stamina, and breath and breathing. And that's why the exercises that we've found has a positive impact on longevity is actually yoga, qigong, tai chi, dancing, and HIIT exercises. These things, they focus on your balance, on your flexibility, on your coordination. In qigong, you have to work on all of these things. Your core muscles need to be, strong, and they need to be working at their optimal. You need to be balanced. You need to coordinate your arms, your legs, your back, your breath. Dancing is amazing in that as well. You're coordinating your arms, your legs. You're remembering what moves you have to do next. You're planning the moves for your partner as well. As a man, as a woman, you're learning to follow, to listen to your partner and be subtle and move with that person. HIIT exercise is high intensity exercise training, which is the simplest form. It would be like running outright for a minute and then walking briskly for 3 to 5 minutes. And there are various different types. But this has profound effects on glucose metabolism, on your strength, on your balance, on your heart health and its flexibility. And practice these things regularly. Do them frequently. At least 3 times a week, you want to work on movement and exercise. There's one thing I want to discuss quickly, and that comes into living longer by living happier. I was at a funeral of, and I also attended shortly after the yearly sort of memorial for my grandfather. And at this prayer, a thought came to me that we live as long, we're here for as long that we want, as long as we want to be here. So we live as long as we want to live, in that sense. If you are in a happy, joyful state of existence, you want to be here. You want to exist here. You want to be part of this existence. You want to share it with everybody around you, the experience that you're having. And that's has a crucial role to play in your longevity. Your consciousness is constantly sending information to every single cell in your body. And that consciousness is actually having an effect on your longevity. Your cells take information and instruction regularly from your consciousness. And if your consciousness is sending information that you're unhappy and you don't want to be here, your cells are going to react accordingly, and your mitochondria that supports your cells are going to react accordingly. And if your cells are sending joy, if your consciousness is sending joyful signals to your cells, you're going to want to be here, and your cells are going to act appropriately. And the genes that work on longevity are going to activate. Your genes, you could have the genetics for something, but your genes activate based on your consciousness, your emotional state, your mind. And that's why you'll find twins, they will suffer from different diseases depending on what they've been through in their lives. All the baggage that we carry around with us and all these things have a negative impact on us. So we're here for as long as we want to be. You'll notice that people, when all of us, when we're in an unhappy state, we will lean towards what we consider the vices in our lives, which are essentially, escapism tactics. And these vices are almost sort of, self-destructive tendencies. Mindless promiscuity, gambling, drug use and abuse, smoking, alcohol use, and sometimes we can abuse other drugs as well that can distract us from our reality. Sweet and sugary foods and junk foods. These things actually give you pleasure for a short period of time, and they distract you from your unhappy, dissatisfied existence. If you observe truly happy and joyful people, you will see that these people don't need these substances. Because why chase after something when you already have it? Why do you need to reach for a piece of cheesecake because it's so amazing when you already feel amazing? And that's why happiness has a huge role to play. And to be happier, you want to connect with your loved ones regularly, because loneliness has a huge impact on your longevity and your health and your well-being. You want to have purpose in your life. And that involves, having something to wake up to in the morning and be happy about, continuing or beginning or working on it. You'll find a lot that after people retire, their health declines rapidly. And that's why, Dr. CHR in our practice and all the doctors in the practice, we tend to recommend retire. Don't stop. Keep working. Now, if you're unhappy in the job that you are and you're thinking that, okay, now I'm coming to this retirement point, you can retire from that job, but start working on something else. Give yourself purpose. And put the things that we find that gives us purpose, the things that have the greatest impact, is things where we're contributing, where we find we're contributing to the whole of mankind. Most people pick up hobbies after they retire, but hobbies are just things to pass the time. What I'm speaking of is something totally different. And giving yourself purpose is sharing with people around you, mastering something, working on something that you can eventually pass on or give to people around you. And that is very, very important. Association with longevity, prayer, meditation, connecting with the divine. It's been found, that when you do these things on a regular basis, you'll find that your longevity is enhanced. And we are not just physical beings. We are spiritual beings. We are mental, emotional beings. We are consciousness. We are energetic. We are physical. And you want to work on all aspects of that. So having a connection with the divine and understanding your connection with everybody around you, and that as well helps in giving you purpose. So you want to engage in those activities on a regular basis. There's a statement: live fast, die young. And if you're constantly going and going and going, and your brain isn't stopping, and you're working and you're figuring this out and doing that, and you're not stopping and slowing down and giving yourself time to breathe, time to generate dark energy and have stillness and silence within yourself, you are going to burn yourself out. And lastly, there's an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed amongst a few patients who regularly visit the practice and who've been with us for a very long time. I know I see that based on their health, they're going to be with us for a very long time. Stop judging yourself. Let go of guilt. Let go of self-loathing and self-hate. I've had the pleasure of meeting a few remarkable individuals that have what I would call no shame. They have no self-loathing. They don't judge themselves. A lot of the things that they do in their lives could be considered a lot of gray area things in terms of morality. But the key of these people is that they don't judge themselves about it. We've all done things that are sort of black to gray area in our lives. And we carry those things as baggage, and we beat up ourselves, and we judge ourselves, and we hold those things in our subconscious. And, we over time, those things build up. And they lead to disease, they lead to dissatisfaction and unhappiness. So by not judging yourself, and what these people do is they look back at whatever they've done that's considered gray or dark areas of their lives. They look at it as, at that point in my life, I was doing the best that I knew how to do, given my circumstances, given what was available to me, given the choices that I had to make. And they don't blame themselves, they don't hate themselves, they don't beat themselves up. And they don't carry shame or self-loathing or self-hate. So look at those things in your life where you are carrying, and stop hating yourself, stop judging yourself, and stop carrying that with you, because that is going to shorten your lifespan. And the practice here, we've talked a lot about deprogramming, death, disease, and degeneration. And when you discuss with patients and you even delve within yourself, you find that we are programmed to die. At a subconscious level, we are programmed to age, degenerate, and develop chronic disease. When you speak to patients and they come and say, a patient will come to you for the first time and say, "Doctor, my blood pressures are rising. I've been diagnosed with high blood pressure. And well, it's about time. I'm in my 60s, so I guess this is normal." No, it's not. Those diseases are based on chronic diseases, and they're not. We have accepted these programs that from the day we're born, society, loved ones, leaders, teachers, they program us to think that we're going to die and we're going to age. Now, I'm not saying that we may live forever if we change this programming. What I'm saying is, again, shoot for the stars, and if you land on the clouds, you've made something of it. So aim for that. Start deprogramming or reprogram your consciousness every day. Wake up and tell yourself, "I'm youthful. I'm reversing my age with every day that goes by. I am eternal." And use positive affirmations and reprogram your mind. Whenever there are thoughts that come up in your mind that speak of death, disease, and degeneration, and it reflects that programming, and be mindful and aware of what's going on within yourself. Change that, reprogram it, shift it so that we're not following along with that program. Lastly, there's a quote that I love, and it's from a very controversial figure, Marilyn Manson, who's into a lot of heavy metal rock, and he was a very controversial figure in the 90s and the early 2000s. But when you listen to his interviews, quite a remarkable fellow. He said that, for me, the key to longevity and immortality, in a sense, has to do with transformation. And if we keep transforming ourselves on a regular basis and changing and shifting, then this is all very much possible. So I guess that's what we have to discuss today based on this. So I guess we'll head over now to the Q&A with John, and we'll see if we can answer some of those questions. I hope what I've said hasn't, created a lot of more questions rather than answers in your mind. But I know we've only had about an hour, and I see I've gone over time by almost about 15 minutes. So yeah, we had a limited time, so we tried to deal with some things that would help. Yes, John.
That was great. Thank you so much, Adriel. I really, really enjoyed it. And we have a lot of great questions. So, guys, we're going to take a short break and show you some of the stuff at Vitality Academy. And keep the questions coming. We will do our best. We'll have roughly 12 or so minutes to answer as many questions as we can. And don't worry, we'll do our best to help you out with them. So keep the questions coming. And if you notice your questions disappearing, the reason they're disappearing is because we've been moving them over to the Q&A section. So Adriel, can you let me know when the share shows up on the screen?
Sure.
Thank you. So if this is your first time seeing this, or if you're not yet a member of the Vitality Academy, we've actually done, this is the 15th webinar we've done as a collaborative, and it's absolutely amazing. So what I love when I get to be kind of the assistant like I am now is I get to find out all the little nitty gritty that helps tie into previous classes and workshops we've had. So a couple that really tie in really beautifully is it up yet, Adriel?
I'm seeing it up now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, you guys probably know there's a couple, so all the other doctors in the practice are actually in the chat answering questions. So when you see an answer, it's from one of the doctors in the practice, okay? And so Dr. Roshan did Finding Joy in Adversity, which is a great one for helping you to actually experience joy in your life regardless of what's happening. So it was beautifully timed in the world we're in presently, but it'll be a great one regardless of the time, because it's, as Dr. Adriel said, it's really important to have that happiness and to be in the moment. Also, there are a lot of questions of various adaptogens outside of the ones for longevity that Dr. Adriel talked about. And one of our first classes we actually did was on supplements and adaptogens. So a lot of the questions that people had, you could actually go back and watch that. So if you're a member, you can check that out. We have a member option, or you can actually just invest in these and have access to them that way. So I just want to bring those up because they tie in perfectly. So the supplements and adaptogens would be a great one, answering a lot of the questions. We actually went over a whole bunch of these. So ashwagandha, there's several questions about that. There was a whole thing we talked about ashwagandha, and several of these that people had questions, again, that were outside of the original. And then again, try to focus on that happiness thing. It'll make a big difference in your life. So thank you again. So let me jump into the question section now. And I'm going to go from the very top. So as we get questions, so give me 1 second. All right. Vindra asks, what's the P53 gene? It was in your earlier one.
Right. So essentially, P53 is a gene. And well, surprisingly, our cells actually have defense mechanisms against cancer. So to prevent a cell from running away when it's been damaged, you actually have genes that actually will try to block that within your cell and within the nucleus. And the P53 gene is one of those genes that actually, the oncogene, they suppress, oncological development, meaning that they suppress cancer from forming. And those senescent cells, like I said, when a cell is starting to turn cancerous and the P53 gene is activated, it can actually turn that cell into a senescent cell. So it blocks the formation of cancer. It's when these P53 genes are also disrupted or the mutations are overwhelming, that's when it's believed that you can have sort of cancer being able to take root. So our bodies actually do have mechanisms to defend against cancer. It's only when these mechanisms are overwhelmed, that's when cancer results.
And how can you protect and encourage mitochondria?
So we spoke about a little bit about Roundup and these things, and trying to avoid these things in your diet can actually help protect mitochondria. The mitochondrial supplements, I recommend you can play around with those. You can actually have one at a time instead of using all four together, and you can pulse them. Use one for 2 to 3 months. Use another one, and these all have positive effects. Exercise as well helps to promote mitochondrial, biogenesis and mitochondrial health. Sunlight also has very positive effects on your mitochondria. So yeah, these are some things that you can use to help and protect you and encourage mitochondrial growth.
Can microwave food also influence the health of your cell components?
Microwave food, I don't use it personally. I tend to be more safe than sorry. A long time ago, we came across some studies showing that that microwavable food can actually slightly shift the isomeric forms of proteins and carbohydrates and other compounds within your food, because it's this AC microwave current that causes these molecules to vibrate. People use the argument and say, well, the sun gives off a lot of microwave radiation, but that's more of a DC microwave, which is slightly different. AC microwaves, alternating current microwaves, they cause frictional heat, and they can also kind of shift these molecules. Now, when some of these molecules shift their isomeric forms, that means the molecules slightly rearrange themselves. They can actually become neurotoxins and nephrotoxins. And when we've tested microwave foods in the practice here, we found that they do not, at all levels of health, they do not affect the body very well. So we don't recommend using microwaves at all. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Adana was asking about what if you're mixed race, when you were talking about like certain genetic groups and their predisposition due to history of eating and such.
I guess it's see what works with you. Look at what those two groups would have eaten, and you can actually try doing a little bit of a hybrid of both of those things. But for the most part, for most races, it's most races that live along the equator. And in Trinidad, that's quite common. Peas, beans, legumes, lots of root tubers, which have lots of soluble fiber, loads of vegetables. Those things. That, unless you mix with some Eskimo, you could more or less, you don't have to worry too much. If you are, you might want to mix in some seal meat and some seafood.
Is quinoa considered a preferable grain?
Yes. So quinoa is actually quite good. It has a lot of protein in it. It has a low glycemic index. There are some saponins in it that have positive effects on testosterone and other things, and it's anti-inflammatory as well. The concern with quinoa is that it should be sort of, traditionally it's been pressure cooked, and pressure cooking actually destroys some of the compounds, some of these things that Dr. Stephen Gundry talks about. Some of these compounds, the name has slipped my mind.
Lectin.
Lectin, right, sorry. I don't know how that slipped my mind. So steam cooking can actually, with high heat and high steam, can actually destroy some of the lectin. So they tend to recommend you do steam cook your quinoa.
Okay, thank you. This is a very cool question. Does eating according to your blood type also be combined with his recommended diet to contribute to longevity? So in other words, blood type, diets, and longevity.
Yes. So next time, Eating Right for Your Blood Type was a revolutionary book at its time, and it gave people another parameter that they could use to decide how they're going to eat in their diet. But the problem with it is that people place too much importance on it. It's a small factor, but it's not a huge factor in terms of your health and well-being. Well, yeah, the information contained in that book does have some positives on eating well for how your blood type is going to respond. But you have lots more other factors besides the blood type that's going to decide what diet is ideal for you and how you eat and what's available to you. So yeah.
Thank you. What about other sugars like coconut palm sugar?
So coconut palm sugar does have a reduced glycemic index versus sort of regular white sugar, but it's still very much, involves, it still has a huge glycemic index still compared to other foods. It's still sugar at the end of the day. So it should be used with caution. And I still classify it as a carbohydrate or refined carb. And so just be cautious with it. It's a little bit better than sugar, but still it is a high load of sugar on your system. It is going to cause insulin spikes and insulin sensitivity and speed up aging process. So.
And what about someone with PCOS?
Yes, I do recommend intermittent fasting for people with PCOS, and it does have a lot of positive benefits. So yes, I do. It's quite amazing. One of the really good things, polycystic ovaries is very much linked to insulin insensitivity and a fatty liver. And intermittent fasting can actually help to decongest the liver a bit and actually slows down the buildup of fat in the liver. So, that fatty liver, because patients are coming to the office now, new patients, you're seeing a lot of people have fatty liver and you're picking it up on your testing. And a lot of people who go for ultrasounds or incidental findings, you find that they have fatty livers. So Yes, intermittent fasting can be very helpful for PCOS and decongesting liver, because the liver does play a role in polycystic ovaries.
Thank you. And then what about the sugar in fruit? So if you eat a whole fruit.
So if you eat the whole fruit, that's completely fine. The fiber in that fruit and the soluble fiber and all the other compounds helps your body in processing those sugars. So in that sense, you actually, that fiber slows down or lowers the glycemic index of that fruit. And the amount of water in there as well also helps. So fruit is fine. I mean, fruit you can overdo, because, and diabetics will tell you this, that, that if you sit down and overdo it with mangoes or very sweet fruits, yes, you will see spikes in your blood sugar, and it can be a bit unhealthy. So yes, you can have fruits, but just be cautious with the amount that you consume.
Okay. What about a 25-hour water fast? Will that reduce diabetes?
So fasting has profound effects on diabetes. It's actually quite amazing. You can actually reverse prediabetes, and I've even seen in some of my patients who have worked with, you can actually reverse diabetes itself with fasting. So the interesting thing is, though, that you have to be cautious. You want to be very careful when you're doing this, because you already have diabetes and you're attempting this. You want to do it under the guidance of a physician or somebody who understands fasting and physiology of it. Because you can actually, if you're not understanding how your medicines that you're taking works with intermittent fasting, you can actually put yourself into a hypoglycemic state, and that's actually dangerous. You can actually go into a coma, and so you want to be very careful. You want to do this under the guidance and supervision of a physician or a health practitioner, somebody who's well versed in these things. But yes, it can be done, and it has really good effects.
What about the sun and skin cancer?
So, people with lighter skin, they have to worry a bit more about sun exposure. And tropical sun exposure tends to be very harsh for people with lighter skin. So they're more adapted to sort of temperate climates. And that's why, actually, to get the vitamin D on a daily basis for a person who is Caucasian or very light skin, you don't actually have to spend a lot of time in the sun. 5 to 10 minutes a day, and you can actually have, get the vitamin D that you need. So you don't need to go and destroy your skin in the sun, because your skin is not really adapted well to coping with the full blast of tropical sun. But yeah, short burst is completely fine, and you can do that. I'm going to address the next question because I'm seeing it one time. Sunblock can affect the question is, does wearing sunblock affect your ability to absorb vitamin D? Yes, it does, because ultraviolet radiation is what helps to generate that. I don't tend to recommend a lot of sunblocks because they, and if you're Caucasian and you're exposed to that high tropical, sun, what you can do is there are mineral-based sunblocks, not the chemical-based ones. Because the chemical-based ones actually carry a risk of skin cancer. Those chemicals can actually affect your ability to develop skin cancer. So what I tend to, there are mineral sunblocks that use zinc and titanium and some other mineral compounds, and they help to block ultraviolet rays. But yes, it can affect the ability to generate vitamin D.
Do SSRI drugs shorten telomeres? I don't know what that is, but you probably do.
Well, they're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are drugs that are very commonly used in antidepressant drugs. I haven't actually done any specific research, but yes, use of certain drugs, most drugs actually that we traditionally use today in conventional medicine, actually have an effect on aging and shortening telomeres. I haven't specifically done any research for SSRIs, but I can research that. And if you give your email address to John, we can go back to you.
Yeah, Aaliyah, shoot us a quick email and just say, hey, and we'll get that answered for you, okay? Yeah. Manifa asked, what about ashwagandha? I'm assuming she's talking about longevity help.
Yeah. So as we were talking about, like, my favorite was gynostemma as an adaptogen. But yes, ashwagandha is an adaptogen. And we found through testing that it works primarily through the adrenal gland, just above the kidneys. And they manage your sex hormones, they manage your salt balance within the body, they can manage the stress hormones within your body. So they play a crucial role in your fight or flight response. And ashwagandha works through that, and it actually helps to sort of improve the health of your adrenal glands and generally your hormonal system. So by doing that, your body adapts better to stress, and therefore it sort of takes the edge off. So yes.
Okay, we only have time for a couple more questions. Gangat, I asked a great one. Can you use a convection oven to heat food rather than a microwave? Is that a good way of doing it? Rather, in other words, to replace that?
Yes, that's a better way of heating food rather than a microwave. Or just good old-fashioned pot and pan or toast oven. I don't know.
And what about putting pieces of turmeric in water and drinking water? Are you going to get the benefit with the turmeric, or does it have to be ground up, or what?
You're going to get some benefits, but ideally you want to grind this stuff up. The smaller the particle size, the more surface area, and the more your body's going to be able to extract out of the turmeric. So just cutting up pieces of turmeric, I mean, it's going to be limited in the ability to absorb that, but grinding it up, grating it, all those are.
And does anyone know, so by the way, I don't know if even anyone in the chat, where you can get quercetin and gynostemma. Can you get that locally, do you know?
We have a supplement available at Ishtara that has quercetin and berberine in it. We don't have pure quercetin. Pure quercetin is a little bit harder to come by, and it can be a bit expensive. But there are, I think it's Herbs and Health in Gulf City in Trinidad. They may have some. Call them and find out. I have sent patients there, and they found some there. You can also find it in Grand Bazaar and in LSD Plaza. Nature's Discount, I think, is the name of the store. They may have it as well. Or otherwise, Amazon is your friend if you have the ability to use a credit card and bring in stuff.
I agree. All right, so this is the last question. So Karen, thank you for the question. And by the way, sorry guys, we didn't get to all your questions. You had a lot of great questions. Thank you so much. What about the role of sleep in longevity and all this?
Yeah, so within that hour, we didn't get a lot of time to cover everything. But yes, sleep is vitally important. And thanks for bringing that up. If you sleep less, and if you find you're getting 5 hours or less, your telomeres in studies that will shorten your telomeres faster than it should be shortening. You tend to find more senescent cell formation and build up during lack of sleep, because lack of sleep is going to damage your central nervous system, your hormonal system, and as well your immune system. So very similar adaptogens help to take the edge off of that, but nothing is really a good substitute for good sleep. A lot of patients, sometimes come to me, Doc, I'm so tired. What can you give me to fix it? And I'll ask the patient, well, how much are you sleeping at night? And the patient will say, well, not much. And I say, instead of looking at it as trying to patch the problem up, just deal with the root cause, try getting more sleep. And in some patients who have the ability to do that, then yes, then I will go forth with advice to do that. The patients who can't, because some patients are caring for elderly loved ones, people who have young children who are not getting enough sleep. I've been there so sort of exiting that phase of my life quickly with sleep issues and dealing with young children. Adaptogens can help quite a bit. But if your job is shift-based, so shift workers have shorter lifespans in general, they're more at risk for chronic diseases. So quality of sleep and quantity of sleep is very important. And if you struggle to get that in your life, adaptogens can help, but they're not a full solution. Sleep is the solution.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Adriel, we are out of time, and all of you wonderful people, we greatly appreciate you coming here today. So thank you for answering the questions, for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I know everyone else enjoyed it. You always know when you get lots of questions that people are like, yeah, this is good stuff. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And so we will see you guys in a couple weeks for the next webinar. And thank you so much. And we hope to see you as well. Sign up for the Vitality Academy. Support us there. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you again, Adriel.
See you guys. Have a good week. End of the weekend. All right.
End of the weekend. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Are we now?